Welcome to Ask Me Anything. It's Marci Brockman. I think it's going live. This is not quite the experiment it was last week, but let's see what happens. The timer is still at 0. I wonder if anyone will show up. It is Wednesday. I can't seem to find it on my page. It is Tuesday. It is Tuesday, the last day, next to last day of September. Hard to believe. I do not know where the month went. It seemed, there we go. It seemed to go extremely quickly and rather frustratingly, actually. Okay, so I'm seeing myself here. I don't want to do that. Let's shut the sound off. It's too weird to watch myself. Okay. Anyway, so ask me anything. So I had 4 people ask questions. So I'm going to start with those. And if anyone else shows up or wants to hear the answers to the questions, then they or ask their own questions, then they can do that. So the first question that I was asked by an author, a non-published aspiring author, was how did I find the editor for my book? That was the first question. So I wrote Permission to Land last fall. I started it October 1st of 2019 and wrote fast and furiously for all of October, all of November, and half of December. And then I realized that I needed to find an editor, and I had no idea how to find an editor. So I reached out to a Facebook friend of mine who happens to be a novelist, and I asked him, how do you find an editor? And he said he would do it. And so that's it, basically. A bunch of years ago, I don't even remember how many years ago, I had found a book. I sometimes pick stories to read that just based on quirky titles. And I was scrolling through audible.com and I found a book called 600 Hours of Edward. And I thought, that's just a quirky title, and I'm a quirky person. I like quirky titles. So I downloaded the book and I listened to it, and without any preconceived notion about what it was. And then I fell in love with it. I fell in love with Edward Stanton, the main character, and the whole concept of the story. And then surprisingly, I found out that there was a sequel and there was a third book as well. So I was very, very excited. So I fast and furiously downloaded them and I listened to all 3 of them, and I fell in love with Edward Stanton, and I just loved this novel. So I went on Facebook and I recommended Craig Lancaster and these three novels in the Edward Stanton series, to my friends. I'm like, you've got to read them. And then my friend Lisa Schlossberg chimed in and she said, oh my God, I know him. My friend Lisa is best friends with his wife, Elisa, because she grew up on Long Island. And then so then I went on, I was like, what a small world, who would think? Especially because Craig Lancaster lives in Billings, Montana, on the polar opposite side of the continent. So I went on Lisa's Facebook page and scrolled around and found Craig Lancaster and friend requested him. And I guess because we had friends in common, he accepted and we became friends. And, he writes on my page, I write on his page, we respond to each other's stuff. And then I started writing my book. And so when I asked him how to find an editor, it was quite comforting to allow him to do me the huge honor of editing my book. I mean, this was not just any book. It was, Permission to Land is my soul. This is my life. This is me. So I needed to give it to somebody who I could trust would treat it with love and kindness and help me make it a better book with honesty and sincerity and kindness, and that's what he did. So it was a phenomenal excuse me, a phenomenal thing. And I talked about this a little bit at length, a little bit more at length on my Book Talk Sunday a few days ago. So that's how I found Craig, my editor. I do know that there are lots of editors out there, and other people can probably find editors through writing groups. And I would imagine if you went on LinkedIn or Goodreads or any of the myriad of authors' pages on Facebook and asked around, you could find someone. You could probably also find someone on Fiverr. People do a lot of advertising for freelance work on Fiverr, Fiverr.com, I believe. Okay, so the next question was, how did I meet my husband? So Michael and I met in January of 1987. It was the day before, or the Saturday before, spring semester of my freshman year at SUNY Geneseo, State University of New York at Geneseo. And it was the day before, or the Saturday before, his first day of his junior year. He had taken the semester off in the fall, which was my first semester freshman year, and I became friends with the group of people who turned out to be his group of friends. So when he returned to school in January, poof, I was there, and we flirted and so on. And he asked me out the day that we met, but I was already dating someone, so I said no. And he wound up dating a bunch of other people and wound up marrying my roommate from sophomore year. And they had 2 kids, and I got married, and I had 2 kids, and then I got divorced, and then a few years later he got divorced, and in between we were still friends, distant friends, but friends. One of the guys in our social circle, in our group of friends from Geneseo, he and his wife would host biannual, like every other year, they'd have like big convergences. They'd have a ton of people show up at their house, and tents and sleeping bags and tons of food, and it was just like chaotic, communal, fabulous weekends, and it kept us all connected. And for the long time before Facebook was invented, this couple would write letters and sort of disseminate information about everybody else to everyone else. Like, we'd all write to them and tell them what was going on, or call them or whatever, and they would write letters and tell everybody else. Anyway, so Michael and I stayed in each other's lives, and then Facebook started, and we were able to stay in each other's lives a little bit more, although it was still distant. And we'd talk, we'd instant message, etc., etc. A few times he would come to parties at my house. I usually have big Halloween parties with costumes and all sorts of stuff. I don't really think I'm going to do that this year because of COVID. But so in 2015, he came to my Halloween party with the design to ask me out officially, like for the first time. And I was dating somebody else, which was a disaster. And so then the night before Thanksgiving of 2015, I came across an article on the Elephant Journal, which I read avidly and write for sometimes. And the article basically said that once you reach a certain age, you've probably already met your soulmate. And it went on to list a bunch of characteristics about what this particular article's author thought a soulmate would bring to our lives. And the first person I thought of was Michael. And it was 3:00 in the morning, and I was crying from being lonely, and where was my life going? And I wanted to be in a relationship. I wanted somebody kind and loving and caring, and somebody who I could trust, who was a good father, who was a good friend, was, like the whole package. And so I read this article, and the first person I thought of was Michael. And what you'll do at 3 a.m, you might not do at noon. So I just sort of, held my breath and messaged him through Facebook the article. I sent him the article and said, if you read this and think this is us, maybe you'll let me take you out to dinner and we can talk about it. And unbeknownst to me, that exact same night, he went to bed with a prayer. He's much more religious than I am, with a prayer that basically said that he was asking God to bring him a woman exactly like me, specifically exactly like Marci in his life. And then he woke up the next morning to my instant message and the article, and he's like, never in my life, in my wildest dreams, would I've ever thought that a prayer would have been answered so literally and so quickly. So we went out to dinner. We couldn't sort of get it together for a couple weeks, but we work schedules and all that. But we went out to dinner, and he was in it hook, line, and sinker, and I was like suddenly like a little gun shy, realizing, of course, that you can't take it slow and casual with a man that you've known for 25 years. That kind of just doesn't work. So it's either like you're in it with both feet and jumping off the diving board, or you're not. And I kind of got a little cold feet, and I hemmed and hawed a little bit. I was just, after a long history of jumping in too quickly and feeling regret about it, I took a few weeks and hemmed and hawed. And then on January 24th of 2016, it was official. You know, we had spent quite a bit of time on the phone talking and very slowly getting to know each other in a very deep way. And by the time I saw him on the 24th, which was the day of my best friend Tim's 50th birthday party that I was hosting, I knew that I was in love with him. And so we exchanged I love yous, and we were just, you know, an item. And then 6 months later, July 15th of 2016, I proposed to him. And of course he accepted. And then on January 15th, 2017, we got married, which was about 9 days shy of our 1-year anniversary as a couple. And so that's it. So he has 2 kids and I have 2 kids, and his 2 kids are a little older. And his daughter, who's 31, has 4 kids and a stepson. So we have between us 4 children and 5 grandchildren. So pretty freaking awesome, actually. Okay, so that's that question. And after, hey Frank, I know you too. How are you, dude? What's cooking? I've been sitting here talking to myself. Frank and I have been friends since like 7th grade or something. He lives in New Jersey, and he's the audio engineer who is helping me with the audiobook version of Permission to Land. I think we are getting very close to the end of that project. You have a question. What's your question, Frank? Frank has a question. My first live question. Yay! We're waiting. How cool is that mic? This mic is very cool. This mic was Frank's recommendation. This whole setup here, my whole Rode NT1 and the little Scarlett interface thing and all the cables. The only piece of this that I picked out myself was the headphones, and actually didn't even pick them out because they came free with my computer. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Yes, we are what? Yes, we're close to the end. Yay! I taped all the redos the other night. The little flubs, you know, as you're reading and you're splicing together and starting over paragraphs because you said the wrong word, etc. You know, you have to go back and fix some stuff. So I stayed up really late so there would be no ambient noise around in the house and no ambient noise in the neighborhood. And Frank says, I sound like I'm doing a radio show. Sounding great. Yay! That's excellent. We like to hear that. I always use this when I'm guesting on podcasts and stuff. And when I make my pitches to podcasts looking for guests that I feel like I'm appropriate for, I include my little home setup here as part of my pitch so they know that I'm going to sound good and I'm not going to be recording it on my iPhone and sound ridiculous. So I don't know if that helps, but sometimes I think I sound better than they do because I have a better mic than they do. Shh. Anyway, I shouldn't say that. I won't get any guest spots on podcasts anymore. So that was your question, Frank? How I like the mic? How was your bike ride? I saw you went on another bike ride today. I'm jealous. I looked on Facebook during a free period at school and I saw that Frank was out on a bike ride. I was sitting in school. I would rather have been on a bike ride. Anyway, the next question are 2 sort of tough ones. They're related and came from the same person. Excellent. I probably do. I'll sound better than them. Maybe I do. Okay, so the next 2 questions came from the same person. Asked How do you stop hearing your ex-husband's awful, hurtful words in your head? And how do you heal and move on from emotional abuse? Way to ask an easy question. A lot of this has to do with my answer has to do with a lot of stuff that I mention in my book, because the book is primarily about how my life was affected by my mother's mental illness. She was bipolar and narcissistic and an opiate drug addict for the last decade or so of her life. And although she was mentally ill for her whole life. And so that sort of set me up for a relationship template for accepting less than I deserved and less than was actually healthy and less than what was making me happy. And so I married a man who's a highly intelligent, very attractive guy, and we just were not a good fit. He, in a lot of ways, was treated me like my mom did, and was very cold and unfeeling, and we just didn't get along. And he was emotionally abusive, and I was a little afraid of him and afraid to state my needs because I didn't want to be rejected and had been repeatedly rejected and sort of made to feel small and irrelevant. And I think the way out of that is to distance yourself from everyone who is toxic and doing that kind of thing to you. It's easier said than done. It is not an easy process. It took me quite a long time to figure out that I want to get divorced, and the whole divorce itself was horrible and painstaking and torturous. And although it wasn't like a big Kramer versus Kramer, like $50,000 deal that dragged everybody through court, we really were kind of grown up about it and went to a mediator who hashed out the whole thing for us, and whole thing was settled in 6 months. But I mean, so that part of it wasn't so bad, but it's still the legal part anyway, but it's still emotionally, it's a very big upheaval. And so then what do? So you're out of the toxic relationship. The person asked ex-husband or ex-boyfriend. So I'm assuming that you're not living with the person anymore. The biggest advice I can give you is to find a good therapist. And some really good friends who you trust to call you on your shit and tell you and be supportive and be kind, and to be supportive and kind to yourself and forgive yourself for having put yourself in that situation for however long you were in it. But I can't underestimate the value of a good therapist and that safe place for open and honest conversation without judgment. Because no matter how great your friends are and no matter how understanding they are, it doesn't really replace the same relationship that a therapist would have, because you can literally say anything and their job is not to judge you, but to help you figure your own stuff out. And besides that, I do a lot of writing, and I'm a big journal writing proponent, supporter, I guess is the better word, having been keeping journals since 1984, and listening to and reading articles and books and things by people who you trust. Like, I find Brene Brown's research on shame and vulnerability to be very foundational and pivotal in my growth and path to wellness. I think that the things that she says about why we feel shame and why we feel vulnerable, and what being brave and feeling all the things that we feel is important. And I'm not a researcher, or am I a therapist, so I'm not going to do regurgitate what Brene Brown says so eloquently. I would strongly suggest listening to her Unlocking Us podcast and reading some of her books. They are phenomenal. I think I've read every single word that she's ever published at least once. Elizabeth Gilbert was also very helpful for me. Believe it or not, so was Amanda Palmer in her book, The Art of Asking. Really taught me how to ask for help. There's a lot of really great authors out there that can help with that sort of thing. And so that's really the best answer I can give you. You have to know that the toxic person in your life says mean things to you because they're trying to control you, because they're trying to make you feel smaller or less capable or dependent upon them so that they can control you, is really the only reason that they talk that way to you. It kind of overcompensates, I suppose, for their lack of confidence in themselves. Like if you were a better, stronger version of yourself, you probably wouldn't stay with them. And I think they know that. And therefore, they have to make you feel smaller and squash you so that you don't leave them. So I think that when people are mean and they say things like that to us, it says way more about them than it says about us. And it's hard not to personalize these things, and it's hard not to take them to heart and have them tear you down. Believe me, I faced all this rejection from my ex-husband and all this rejection from my mom, and I thought it was all my fault, that I wasn't worthy of love and belonging. I wasn't worthy of their respect. I wasn't worthy of love and feeling happy and safe, which is really sad that I didn't feel that way. And I was mad at myself for a long time. Like, how could I have let all of that happen? And you just, I say just, it makes it sound so easy, but it's not. You need to process and feel it all, and then somehow, with enough space and processing time, compartmentalize it and put it away. Like, make some sense out of it. When I was getting divorced and he was screaming at me, you're never going to find anybody like me ever in your life again. My response was, yay, that's a good thing. When you're going to be alone for the rest of your life, you're going to be celibate for the rest of your life. You're never going to find anybody. You're going to be alone. You're unlovable. It suddenly clicked in my head, like I was sitting in a Psych 101 lecture hall in college. Like, what he's actually saying to me, he means about himself. So if you can try to figure that out, like, take all of those catchphrases or all of the things that you remember your ex saying and realize that most of the time the feelings behind what those things are about them, not about you. Anyway, so that's it. That's my answer. Therapy, writing, reading experts. Brene Brown's like my go-to for stuff like that, and talking with people that you trust. Anyway, I've taken 20 minutes of your time. Thank you for sharing the time with me. This is Marci Brockman. This was Ask Me Anything, the first episode. The plan is to do this every Tuesday at 8:30. And hopefully you'll ask me questions. I had 4 this week. It's super great. You can instant message me through Facebook, the little PM private message thing, and send me your questions. You can email me if you want at marcibrockman@gmail.com. But really, that'll get lost there. The best way is to instant message me through here. And that's it. So I hope you have a lovely evening and a wonderful week. And be kind to yourselves, and that's it. I'll see you soon. Thanks for joining me. Bye.